Find your audience by going back to the basics. So
I love this topic because I think that a lot of companies need to go back to the basics. So when we brought this topic up, what did you have in mind to explain to our audience what that exactly means?
I love this topic because it's actually so simple, and you think every entrepreneur, every CEO would know this, is do what's already working. It's so simple. I don't know how many times I've gone to companies and they're like, yeah, we're doing conferences. It's okay. How many conferences are you going to? Oh, we're going to 2. How many more conferences do you think there are? Like 2 more. And I was like, okay, how much time does it take for your marketing team? It takes up almost all of our time. I was like, okay, what else do you want to do? He's like, well, I really want to do like demand generation. I've been hearing a lot about that. I want to do inbound. I want to do ad funnels. I want to do all these things. And I go, why aren't you just doing more conferences? It's like you have 2 more. So the inventory left of that channel is the 2 more you have identified that fit your ideal customer profile. So rather than just trying to maximize that, which by the way, your marketing team is already pristinely built to execute because it's all they're doing, you want to change the direction of that team, make them do a bunch of things that they have actually no experience or track record in your organization to do. And you want to do it because of what? Just honestly, shiny object syndrome, or maybe some CEO or executive forum talking about distributing your channels. Like, there is no good reason. So back to basics is simple. Focus on revenue. Focus what's already working. And I can almost guarantee a majority of companies, especially sub like $10 million in ARR, annual revenue, you are not fully maximized likely in the channels that you are in. Like, I can almost guarantee it. You typically only really start seeing that when you like blow past 15, 20 million in ARR. Like then you're getting to the point where you're like, you got to think about some other things, right? So think about community. You want to think about events. You want to think about demand generation. You want to think about content. You can want to think about doing a podcast. Like now you really need to go into all these different channels to grab bits and pieces of your total TAM. But the likelihood of you maximizing AdWords, like I'll give a great example. I know almost very few companies who have totally maxed out Google ad display.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like the difficulty, the sheer size of inventory and the likelihood of anyone developing a full funnel that's blacklisting enough of the garbage inside of Google ad display where they actually have a profitable funnel. I'm going to say 1 in 100,000 companies. Mm-hmm. Because the amount of money you can spend on Google ad display is massive. And
limitless almost. Right.
Yeah, and you can blow your entire budget in a day if you wanted to. And so this idea that we have to do more is just so unfounded. The likelihood that you're maximizing SEO, unlikely. The likelihood of you maximizing Google Ads, unlikely. Maximizing any other channel, unlikely. So just focus on what you already know is working. Rather than constantly distributing what limited resources, like human technical resources you have to execute on these strategies, on strategies they have not executed before. And companies just fall flat all the time.
So, well, I mean, the bright, shiny objects thing, there's so many business owners out there that are seduced by the dark side of the bright and shiny thing, whether, like you said, it's a blog post, it's a mastermind group, they see someone else doing it, so they think, oh, I'm like them, so I need to try it. That the seduction is strong. It's like you're a Jedi getting seduced by the dark side of the Force. It's like the pull is there so much that I need to try it a little bit. It's sexy. It makes me feel empowered. So, I mean, go back to basics. What do you say to that CEO, that owner? Just wake up, get back to what you're doing. What's wrong with, focusing on what works? But the seduction is there for the new thing. Now it's like Chat GPT's trying to occupy all the oxygen. What am I supposed to do to do this, to implement my strategy without focusing on what works? What do you say to those business owners?
So I think this is why I'm lucky, because I have not worn traditionally a marketing hat my entire life, mm-hmm. right? I've been very lucky to work with some very large companies in executive capacities. So I can just say things that are really mean but are really obvious.
Yeah.
And I go, what business are we in, right? And I don't know what business, we're talking about. Well, let's just call it, age-old saying, widgets, right?
Right.
So it's like let's call so and so CEO John. John's really fixated on the fact that we really need to do masterminds, and I go, John, what are we selling right now? We sell widgets. I'm like, perfect. Okay. So how have we sold the widget? We've sold the widgets through this thing. Okay. So is it fair to say that our marketing team is specialized in selling widgets on this specific channel? And they'll go, yes. So I'll go, John, why are we selling silver spoons? And they'll go, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, why do you expect your team to adjust a completely different strategy where they have no operational foundation and you think you're going to get more revenue quicker, faster, than just pouring more money into already what you know works? So are you going to sell widgets and widgets in the adjacent market, or are you going to sell silver spoons? You can sell silver spoons, but you know the probability of it failing. So the probability of a mastermind failing, probably pretty high on the first chance. So you have a choice. You can waste the next 6 months executing on silver spoons, or you can focus on your widgets, which you're already doing. And you probably know the answer for your marketing team.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question then. I'm a startup company. I'm going to do a scenario. I'm a startup company. I just started my roofing company. What would you advise to a brand new roofing company on the basics of marketing that they should implement into their business?
Oh, that's a pointed question.
Right?
So I'm happy you asked, because we do work with local businesses, and so what I would say, every business has different, what I call starting foundations. So any local business that I talk to generally don't afford us because we work with larger enterprise companies, but I always tell them it's pretty simple. Google My Business is your bread and butter. If you do not focus on Google My Business, you are missing a large part of the market. And generally speaking, Google My Business rankings are based on how many reviews you have. So the faster you get reviews, the better you're going to be ranking for that. The longer it takes for you to get the reviews, the longer your competitors are going to be beating you. And that's a major ranking factor on Google My Business. So for anyone listening, Google search and Google My Business and ranking on maps are two separate algorithms. So they have different needs.
Thank you. Yes.
And so basically I would just say, look, you're a local business, so you need to focus on local things. And so rather than you need a website, because again, we have to establish a level of confidence. You're a roofing company. You don't want to look like you're a bunch of people living out of a truck. Like, you got to make it look like you can put on a roof and not have it leak. So do what you need to do to instill confidence, but really focus on how you're going to make that image strong and how you're going to use all the assets you currently have, because you're likely not a huge SaaS company, so you have limited budget. How are you going to make your trucks, your vans, everything that you have already convey the message of confidence? So, a lot of companies, especially local companies, would be like, well, I have a truck. I don't want to spend a bunch of money on vinyl. I was like, well, you can spend a bunch of money on vinyls, or you can spend a bunch of money on digital ads. But I can guarantee you this: if someone needs a roofing product and comes and sees your truck and it's like rusty and it doesn't look good and it doesn't have your website, there's no confidence. So you're not going to get the sales. So spend the money on the things that you already have, and try your best not to focus on all the shiny objects. Focus on the things that are local. And I think really, really pay attention to those things. That's what I would recommend to a local business.
So once they grow their revenue, at what point do you recommend things like billboard advertising, radio advertising, TV advertising?
That's an operational question. So I would simply ask, it's like, look, are you at the point right now where you're actually getting so many inbounds based on your current strategies where you are actually you actually need a team to actually like triage the sales? And if you're getting to the point where the principal is now no longer actually able to deal with the triaging, you're getting to the point where you're essentially needing to generate more demand in order to meet the scale that you require. So that's a tough thing for me to say for every company, because I can kind of say what you can do for SaaS just on rough revenue numbers, but for roofing companies, it depends on how many people they have. It depends if they're on temp workers or if they're on contract workers or full-time contractors. It depends on how much inventory they have or their scope of reach. But what I will say is, usually when you can start hiring more people is probably when you start ramping up. So you want to scale with your revenue. And if you get to the point where you've maximized all your current assets, meaning the assets that you have to run your actual business, so you don't have to spend all this extra money, then you can start looking at outdoor advertisements. And a tip for this that I really recommend, and real estate agents, I'm talking to you, use call tracking software, please. Like, your ego is so thick, no one cares. You're not Pizza Hut. No one's calling your number because they've memorized it and they need it. They call it like in the immediate need. Every single person in this world seems to think that their phone number is so important, but it isn't. It's only important when someone needs it. So use call tracking to make sure you actually know what out-of-home is working for you. And what this means is every single out-of-home thing you have has a different number. And so then you actually know where people are calling you from. It's like so important, but a lot of companies are very ego about this and they just don't do it.
Shout out to WhatConverts, the CEO was on our podcast, and that's your call tracking, form fill tracking, website bot tracking,
everything tracking,
everything tracking.
Every channel.